It's a real pleasure that we haven't finished yet. You know, I feel like we've absorbed so much content. We've sort of put so many ideas through a funnel, and you've been very kind and generous in coming up with some very succinct concepts that we can take forwards, and we will take forwards into lots of other forums. I think that's very important. There's one person who is very clever at getting practical. She's worked in New York. I can't believe you can work in New York. But you've done it, what, for 9 years? At least 9 years. Skye Duncan is the Executive Director of the Global Designing Cities Initiative. And it's not just New York, because I think New York is a little bit like London. I worked in London for a few years, and Londoners never even think of even outer London. You know, they never even go south of the river. They just sort of think that whatever is in the center of London is their entire world. When I first had a meeting in New York with actually someone I'm sure you know well, they don't even have chairs in the office. If you don't say it in the first 3 minutes, then they start walking out and actually going off and having another meeting. When we used to send emails, they got it on their pagers. Do you remember this? Or those little devices? Yeah, and on their Blackberries. Thank you. I couldn't even remember the word. Do you remember those things? But basically, if it wasn't in the first line, then they just scrolled. And I thought, actually, I just thought it was incredibly rude. However, what we learned to do, and they did host a Walk21 some years ago, was get to the point. And so let me get to the point. Can I please introduce and bring to the stage Skye Duncan, who I think is one of the most genius people who can translate policy, help cities to deliver by just putting it down on paper and explaining it in a really simple way. Will you come and help us with that story now, please? Skye.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jim, for that very kind introduction, and to Bronwyn, Jim, Walk21, and TU Dublin for having me here. It's a great honour, and huge kudos to all of you guys. It is pouring. I hear like wet Irish rain outside, and it's the end of the fabulous conference, and so wonderful to have all these kind of hardcore, passionate walkers here today to wrap us up. So today I'm excited to kind of talk about streets for walking, or streets for bollard hugging, as my niece likes to do. Bollard licking, not so cool in the post-pandemic world. But as Jim alluded to, I spent a long time, I've been in New York for 15 years between city government and what I'm doing now. So these were the streets that I was very used to walking. And since COVID, I've actually been back in my homeland as a Kiwi in New Zealand, so that the streets are a little less urban, but it still felt very fortunate. And I've actually had a new addition to my family. I've got a little 5-month-old, as you probably heard down here. And so, you know, these walks and these environments walking was a really big part of kind of both mental and physical health for the past few months. You know, I'm just thrilled to be back here in Dublin. This is my first week back from maternity leave, so I'm not sure if I'm actually still able to string a sentence together, but we'll give it a go today. And so really excited to be walking the streets of Dublin and introducing them to the next generation. And I think this week has been amazing to see, you know, the reality of, like, we know what's possible through all the different talks. You know, we've heard of through policies and plans and practices, various, like, concrete examples of projects and programs. Phenomenal what is coming out of Ireland at the moment, and some of the other countries and cities in the region. The power of the precedent, right, when we all kind of look to each other and steal and borrow ideas because we don't have time to reinvent the wheel. And of course, the partnerships and the people, you guys, the ones here making the difference on a daily basis. So as I mentioned, the lens through which I'm going to talk to you about walking, or we're going to chat today, is through streets. And this is our largest continuous network of public space in our cities, and therefore this kind of insanely large untapped asset that we have to grapple with the kind of plethora of challenges that we're faced with. You know, we've spent decades doing ridiculous things like giving this real estate over entirely to private vehicles, forgetting about human beings and that we are the people that keep our cities running and rolling, to the point that we're, people having to risk their lives on a daily basis simply to cross the street or to take the hand of their children to get to school, and that people with disabilities are really treated in a completely disgraceful way. We've got to the point, unfortunately, in how we're designing our streets is that we're killing people slowly through the air pollution, particularly the impacts on our young people. We're killing people slowly through lack of physical activity. Our streets are often no longer safe to be out, and so parents aren't as comfortable allowing their kids out there, and so they're not getting enough physical activity. And we're killing kids and people quickly. Globally, 500 kids are dying each day, and it's devastating when we remember that it's the #1 killer of our young people across the globe. Ridiculous. This is completely preventable. So our team, has taken a lot of these kind of big global crises and used this. Some of you may have seen our Global Street Design Guide. I've got a copy here. And this really we released it a few years ago. It's a free download, but it really kind of tries to create a new blueprint for how we design our streets, working with experts from around the room, many of who are probably here. And we've since had over 100 cities, countries and regions also actually, and organizations, sign up and sign a one-page letter to endorse this as a kind of a commitment to doing things differently. And this is based off the model at NACTO, where GDCI has just spun out in the last few months, where we've been incubating for the last 7 years. We don't yet have Dublin or Ireland or many of the other fabulous places that are represented here today in the room, so feel free to come up and chat afterwards, and I'm happy to chat to you about that. We've been working on trying to make it more accessible to more folks around the world through translation, and also kind of expanding on, even though this is a giant, I often use it as like my weights when I'm traveling. Sometimes we could only put a page or two on a certain piece of information. So we've expanded that. We released Designing Streets for Kids, Anna Siprokova, my colleague in the audience, helping lead that work. And more recently, and I'll come back to the Streets for Kids, actually just a couple of months ago, Najwa Doman has done an incredible job leading our work on 2 new resources, and we've got a couple of prints here that you can grab, we look at afterwards if that's helpful. And they're really just getting to not only this big picture thinking, but the very practical guidance of how do we go about transforming our streets, how do we follow up, how do we collect the metrics and start to measure what matters most, because we know we're all limited in the resources that we have. So I encourage you to take a look at that, all free downloads. But in our work, we're really trying to take these big global agendas and transform, through local action, whether it's a political leader, to inspire them to know what's possible, to give the technical guidance to our practitioners, to transform their regulations, and to empower our communities to know what to ask for and what to demand of their city streets, where we can invert this kind of outdated hierarchical pyramid where the car has been king and instead put people, put walkers, put kids, elderly people with disabilities as the top priority of how we make our decisions in designing every street. Where we put, and I heard this a number of times, people in place as the key inputs to make these decisions with the desired outcomes of improved health and sustainability, economic, environment, and equity through these strategies. And of course, it's all really great to get brand new street designs right, but the bulk of our cities are already built. So actually, we need to be going and asking what's possible of the spaces that we already have, almost looking at our streets through a new lens, and asking that question and challenging ourselves to say, how can this space work for more functions, green infrastructure, water management, improving our biodiversity? How does it work for all of our users that we see on our streets and not just the people sitting in the big metal boxes? How can we do that at multiple scales, from the comprehensive network to the kind of slices of street that we distribute to different users, the geometries as we call them, and then the toolbox of all the other elements that help support a great environment if you're walking or cycling. And we encourage not only kind of work on this in offering, trying to make accessible this guidance We know many city governments and country governments don't have the resources to create their own guidance, hence we did this. So we know we need the paper, we need the policy, but also the practice on the ground, and our team spends a big amount of time touching down in about 30 different cities across the globe, applying these strategies through a number of different lenses. The policy and design guidance, so important, but really not that sexy when it comes to showing pretty slides. But this is the stuff that can transcend political administrations and that takes decades to do, and the ultimate goals of what we're trying to change to shift for the next generation. So whether it's creating new mobility plans, street design manuals, that type of thing is one area that we help work with governments. Tons of capacity building and training and community engagement, whether it's with engineers, or planners, designers. The conversation just here at the end actually, reminded me we've started doing a lot of trainings with journalists to help shift that conversation so that word can get out, and with enforcement, so that they can help support in certain contexts around the world how we can do this differently. And of course community engagement, where we can bring the local expertise with the industry knowledge to come up with the best type of solutions. And one of my favourite parts, of course, is getting projects on the ground and measuring what matters. So whether it's in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, where we can transform, firstly in a matter of hours, here, and I was telling someone the story actually where the chief engineer came up to me after we did this with all the engineers, and he was like, "Skye, you've taken away all the space from the cars." And I was saying, "Oh yes, Mr. Tamu, but actually 96% of your population are taking transit or walking, and 88% of your fatalities are pedestrians, and they need this space, and the bus can still turn and stuff." And I thought I was going to lose my job. It was one of the first projects we did, and he just looked at me and he said, "Well, why is this not permanent?" And I was like, "Well, that's where you come in." So we got the permission to then do a 6-month trial, work with local artists to collect some of the metrics, quantitative and qualitative, to then encourage the city to go back, and then they built it in capital construction, but also helping work with them to set up interagency task force and commit to doing 10 of these intersections every year. So it takes a long time, but sometimes these smaller short-term projects can catalyse longer change. When it comes for our Designing Streets for Kids work, again, this kind of policy and matching with projects on the ground. We've just finished working with 12 cities across the globe through trainings and practice as well, to help encourage this new lens to think about, our streets are not only for the improved and independent mobility, but also that they're places to pause and sit and play and spend some time. That we get our safety and accessibility as the fundamental right that we've heard so often. But then we add in these layers and make sure we're talking about health and comfort and inspiration and education, and that our streets could actually be places to foster love and joy on a daily basis. That we can shift away from this idea of just surviving to actually thriving through reducing our speeds, which we just heard about, through adding green landscaping and to give ourselves space for shades, more space for moving, cycling, disincentivising private vehicles and building wider sidewalks. And that, I know everyone in this room comes from a different background, and there's no one scale that's more important than the others. We have to be working at the kind of broader city scale, city policy scale, at that network scale, right down to the detail and how many centimetres and inches an accessibility ramp is to move about the city. So, we hear again and again this, the importance of integrating our land use and density decisions with our transportation planning, and this is so often done in isolation and absolutely critical at that scale. But then also thinking about, for each of the users, how do we make sure those networks are connected? We're not ending up in dead ends. You see, it sounds so stupid, right? But like the number of sidewalks you see that are, go along and then they just stop in the middle, and pedestrians are kind of pushed into the middle of the roadbed. And then at the scale of the sidewalk, how do we break down each of the individual elements, from the clear path to the ramp, as we mentioned, to the crosswalks and the signals, but then add in these other layers, the shade, the moment to sit down, to change a nappy on a park bench, or to step aside for a child to kind of learn or have a tantrum and not feel like it's the most stressful experience, and that we can get our building edges as part of it, and all together that we get these great pedestrian experiences, that we can get things like our crossings right as well as our sidewalks to build that comprehensive network. So those daily struggles instead can be just a part of everyday life to get around and to make our lives easier, through shorter crossings and more compact intersections where we have raised crossings, not raised bridges, but raised crossings where the cars are the ones having to go up and down, and we as pedestrians get to kind of just walk across. Where our sidewalks can be places to play, to walk hand in hand as a family, to perhaps balance on a ball, to climb and giggle, dance perhaps, and play. As cycling, I know, is another important topic, and we need to kind of work on all of these together, but same kind of thing. I won't focus on it too much today, but this idea of the full, complete network, where our intersections are connected, protected, where the bike facilities are connected, and we have a complete network over time, and that this is not the cyclists that we are designing for, but we're designing our cyclists for families, and that if you ever see a facility, or as a policymaker or a designer, that you wouldn't take your 5-year out on a bike, then it shouldn't count as part of the network. It's not doing the job properly. So we now, again, the power of the precedent, we see examples all over the globe that we can borrow and steal ideas and adapt. And this is one we worked on in Ethiopia and Addis as well, giving them their first protected bike lane. Complementing that with the kind of education of the next generation, where cycling is a norm, where streets can be closed so that families can go out and trial that on a weekly basis, and have safe spaces to park their bikes, where our bike share systems can be e-bikes and have car seats on the kid seats on the back, like we see here in Milan. And the amazing, in Fortaleza, the amazing bike share program for kids that they have there, that's just so inspiring to see. And similarly with transit, right? The comprehensive network where we get all these other elements. Angie was talking about the bus shelters. So easy for us to get this so much better than we do it today across the globe. The daily struggles that can instead perhaps be an enjoyable part of the daily routine, getting in and out, and even adding in elements of play and joy, like we see in some of these fun examples when we're waiting a few minutes in our day. So some of the key strategies that you guys can take back, there's 5 of these that we try and apply, right? One is to upgrade. How do we start? By looking at what we've got and just getting the simple upgrade, whether it's adding crossings, allowing people to cross the street, or improving sidewalks that are cracked or potholed or not accessible for people to get through. How can we protect? We hear about the importance of speed. How do we use the street design to transform the streets so that they do protect our most vulnerable users? Through crossings, through protected bike intersections, and through reducing our speed limits like we're seeing across the globe. How do we reclaim our streets? This is one of my favourites, because when you look at the capacity of a street of 3 metres of space and how many people we can fit in that space, we see very quickly that either through parking and travel lanes, we really do not get anywhere close to the capacity and efficiency when we prioritise walking, cycling and transit. That we can almost overnight, by drawing our lines in a different place, move 2.5 times or hold 2.5 times as many people in that same space. Where we can draw, inspiration from Paris or from Copenhagen, where that space is reclaimed for cycling, for walking, for transit. Sometimes even taking any little sliver that we can, like this one in Auckland in New Zealand, or entire intersections that can be rethought and reimagined. And it was great to see, I stole this image from one of the PowerPoint presentations, that this is happening more here in Ireland. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And I really need to come back and spend more time to see more of the work around the schools. Once we've got some of the kind of fundamentals, activating the space through adding elements of play, through colour, slides, seating, moments for pause and joy to occur, where instead of, storing metal boxes, we can bring people together through a ping pong table, perhaps, a beanbag to sit and relax like we see here in Tel Aviv, or a moment to sit and enjoy some rest. This is an example outside a children's hospital in Fortaleza, Albert Sabine, where the parked cars could be taken away, and just by adding benches, you see, such a transformation, so straightforward, and such a big impact. And finally, thinking about how do we extend? We so often think about the sidewalk and the street as the ground plane, but actually our experience is three-dimensional. So how can we not only get that ground plane right and rethink that, but start to take in the surfaces and textures and opportunities around the edge of the streets? Perhaps when we get that moment to look up, that we can appreciate the architecture or enjoy some of that great green filtered light we heard about that is so good for our mental health, and bring in the colour and lighting so that it can be used at all times of the day. These different strategies can come together at entirely different scales of streets. There's never one perfect solution. We know that a single street design might be redesigned like this with a linear park, or with transit priority, or with side service lanes, where the before condition can be completely reimagined, like we see here in this street example in Moscow, or where commercial or mixed use streets can be transformed again to think about all the different modes of moving around, like we see in Ljubljana. Thinking about our smaller residential streets that can have the slower speeds and invite residents out to spend joyful times, like this example in Copenhagen, where the kids can actually feel safe enough to smell the herbs and climb up on the benches, or a father can teach his child to ride a bicycle. And of course, thinking about our key spaces around the fundamental destinations in our neighbourhoods. For example, our hospitals, our schools, where this space can be rethought, where play is at the centre, and as we've heard, that we start from the outside and get the things in that are fundamental at the beginning. A bit like this one in Istanbul that we've been working on to transform in a temporary nature, collecting the metrics to then go back and have capital construction. And I mean, it's a no-brainer, but working with the local community to see the type of transformation and what happens in the after condition. Just that used to be a car park, right? And now it's a local destination. Or we saw an image of this Spoleto Plaza in Milan, where we've been working for the past few years, where the space outside a school can be transformed, where parents previously had to stand in the middle of the roadbed to wait for their kids. And now actually that they can come together and chat. The local kids were involved in it, and this little girl, her sign was Plaza of Dreams, which was quite phenomenal, the winning award, really, from us. But now you see all these young folks, all generations coming together and building social cohesion in this space, which is just so powerful, even those cute little moments to share a secret after school. And the City of Milan has now scaled this up. They did an open call. They've now implemented 38 of these around the city, and it's quite phenomenal. Now 50%, through this program, 50% of the people in Milan now live within 15 minutes of one of these plazas that have been transformed. So it does just show us how those kind of small catalyst projects can scale up and influence the policy and programs. And finally, with Fortaleza, one of my colleagues showed these slides the other day, but Cidade do Esmil, this was an example where the space was transformed in a matter of a weekend, and it was meant to be for 15 days. And we see, it was done with paints, and we got planters out, and it really was clearly much safer, much more enjoyable to spend time. And in fact, one of the little kids here, you can see we're still painting, like the paint is wet on the ground and we're blocking people off. They were just so desperate to be out in this space. And this little kid, we were chatting to him, he's the son of one of the business owners there, and we were saying to him, I don't speak Portuguese, but my colleague was explaining, he was running like this way, horizontally, back and forth, and he was so excited that the cars were gone. And we said, you know what, tomorrow you're going to be able to run from like here all the way down there and back, and there's no cars. And this was his reaction. I did not pay him to do that, I swear. It is like unbelievable. So the numbers are important, of course, we collected those, but it's these types of moments that remind us why all of this is so important. Like, yes, there's shady places to now sit, and fathers can take, the kids and learn how to ride their bikes. And the community clearly preferred the after condition. And actually one of the local business owners went back and advocated to the mayor that this become permanent, and it was. So the city actually not only made it permanent, created a citywide program where we worked with them on transforming other sites like Drago de Mar. Again, this type of quick, rapid transformation where we see the before condition completely inaccessible, and that's the exact same view in the after condition where people could get around. Some of the simple strategies of the shorter crossing distance, the tighter turning radius, all the stuff we already know makes it safer and makes it better. And we just put it on the ground. We can show that the speeds are safer for everybody, that more people were out walking, more people were out sitting in that space and enjoying it. And they were then able to continue to scale these types of strategies to their downtown streets, where they could see 90% fewer people were walking in the roadbed, but more importantly, more young people were in that space in the after condition. They scaled it up to work a bit like here in Ireland around all of their schools, and so this has been kind of a really exciting project happening in the last couple of years where kids, we need a lot of amazing academic research, and we do need a lot of standards, but sometimes when we get emojis, the kids kind of know what the answers are, in many of these cases. This is really unsafe to cross. Sad emoji, I'm stressed out. And so, they've been continuing to scale up this work there, which is quite phenomenal in itself. But they're also seeing the data, and they were actually one of the few cities in the world to halve their fatality rates by 50% and meet the accidental UN road safety goal a couple of years ago. So our hope is that some of these tools are able to kind of inspire you guys in the places that you work to reimagine and rethink and redesign streets that are safer and more sustainable. We know that these types of transformations do not happen by accident. It's people like you guys being the pain in the backside, putting your hand up, demanding that we make different decisions and that we do this in a different way. So we need the bold visions that are coming out and your advocacy and technical support to continue getting there. We are seeing great progress, but we've got a long way to go. So if you can find someone, take them out on the street and ask them to think from a 95 centimetres, the height of a 3-year-old, and just do it. Whether your skill set is through communicating or funding or measuring or demanding, just go out there and do it. Put streets so that we can have our kids and our next generation as the top priority, and then we can make them great for everybody. But I do have to finally close by giving you a warning that if we get this right, we're going to start to see more things on our streets. We're going to start to see things like gossiping, definitely a bit more lingering and congestion. You'll start to see them, and barricades will emerge. And when things kind of get tough, we start to see a bit of graffiti, some intergenerational interactions. So beware. When things get really tough, the sword fighting and the fist fighting come out. So I've warned you. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks again for the invitation from me and my future street shaper.
I told you she was good. I just think it reminds me, when we Bron and I used to travel with Noah, and in fact he learnt to walk at one of these Walk21 conferences a long time ago, and he's now 6'3", and he wasn't able to come this time, and he's going to miss a lot of you, but because he's at college. But I think there's something about always including children in our events, and I hope you'll always feel able to bring your children, but not just that, bring your parents. Why not? And I'm really thrilled that you're here. Thank you so much for coming with Skye and making it happen. It's so hard to wrap up at the end of a week like this, but I do want to just pull a couple of things together. I wanted to thank you really for already giving us an agenda which will effectively be our conclusions, as it were, our agenda for going forwards. I think you've already written those, and we've heard many of them already. We're going to get that all organised, and there are very much a commitment that we're going to take that forwards and share it in lots of different places. But what I did want to reflect just briefly was thinking really about the legacy here in Ireland, and possibly your legacy that might be useful to share across such a broad agenda. And it got me thinking about why we came in the first place, really. And there were certainly probably 3 or 4 reasons that I wanted to just share with you, and sort of thought, well, what impact might we have had? Or what is it that we're going forwards with? Or what might we say, because we're going to leave again tomorrow? What might be the opportunity of things that we've learnt in order to go forwards? And the first reason why we came was basically Lorraine and Jason. Stand up, please. Don't be shy. You've heard their names a number of times, and a lot of people have said to me, why isn't Lorraine presenting actually her data? You know, she is actually one of these global stars around walkability. She's been teaching this for some time. Many of you might even have been taught by her. And I think it's a multidisciplinary approach that she's done that I hope you'll go back to being able to provide that overview and make that. You know, you're that spider, aren't you? We've described you in this web that sort of knows everybody, but to some extent you know everything, you know, and I think we need to sort of enable you, please, Professor, doctors. How are we going to use that knowledge in the best way that we can? And Jason, you know, you're the one who's got in touch through your networks. You've actually brought all those communities together. What you've found and what you've tapped and what you've actually capitalised on is that there is a huge demand from people who say, actually, I wouldn't mind going for a walk. And I don't know that there's ever anyone who's actually rejected you and said, no thanks, there's something better on the TV today. It seems to be that wherever you've gone, the participation rates have gone up and up and up, and you've created a team that has meant that your impact has now worked across the country. Part of the reason we came was not just to come and see it, but to validate that and to showcase it and recognise that I think you're absolutely at the top of your game. I'm sure there's more that you can do. And when we came a year or so ago, just before COVID, much as there was a lot to celebrate and you were rewriting new policy and things, and there's nothing wrong with your policy, I think you've got it all right, you knew that there were other people in the room who had to be in the room, people like Active Travel, who were going to help you with delivering environments so that those communities that you said, why don't you go out for a walk, would make sure that when they opened their door, that there was actually something that was going to embrace them, encourage them, support them, and make it feel like it was the best experience of their lives. And I hope that this event, to some extent, has helped build capacity for that, your reaching of communities, your training of teams, and your accumulation of resources and support. You know, what's happened, just even in the last 2 or 3 years since we thought we would come, is that actually we've had 365 million agreed, you know, $1 million a day, has been added to the budget for this. I can't say that was because of us, but I think it is part of that momentum. They've also employed 280 new active travel officers, you know, to actually spend that money. And they've done the policy. Yes, absolutely. Give these people a clap. TU Dublin, you are faced with a challenge. You know, you're sitting here in the middle of the town with all this expertise, with all this knowledge, and it is about making it practical, isn't it? And I think what we've heard time and time again is that there is a community of practice of experts who want to not just write articles. You know, from Lake said to us right from the beginning, there's a lot of evidence now. We need to take it out. And I think some of the things we've heard just in the last a few sessions, it explains the fact that this need to translate that knowledge and to share that knowledge, to get that maturity that is already written down and actually delivered and supported out there. So I hope that TU Dublin, you will help with that transition, help and go beyond the campus walls. You know, I know this was an asylum, but I think you'd be mad not to get out of here. The second reason we came was because of political commitment. We've heard from Lorraine earlier today that we had Jack, we had Eamon, we had Frank today, all speaking, not just reading speeches, but actually believable speeches, I think, that demonstrated support across parties. I don't think we've ever had that before, not from 3 different ministers at a national level from 3 different parties. And I think that is a unifying thing, as you said this morning, Lorraine, which was quite something. But the person actually who, the politician who we did feature, but you might have missed the fact that just how important she was Nessa. And she was slightly missed because she was totally upstaged by her daughter when she came yesterday. Nessa, as she explained, was firstly a teacher here, interestingly. And I think, again, this sort of hothouse of the university, it does demonstrate that, I'm sure you weren't responsible for her then becoming a mother, but, you know, she went from teacher to mother to activist to politician, and recognized in that way that this resource, that how she could turn her abilities and skills and knowledge into making sure that her daughter's conditions weren't going to be limited in any way by the fact that she felt able to change something, she would. What we heard from Edith, and you know, we've done this for 22 years, and I haven't ever cried before, I have to say, and I don't know that there were many dry eyes in the house. I wanted to say I started crying when Charles spoke, and by the time Edith was finished, I couldn't even get out of my chair. But what Edith described was lavender. Do you remember? When she was 3, she was taken out into a garden and allowed to walk around the garden, and it smelt of lavender and the paths were smooth. And she felt, this is going to be great. These were her words. She seemed to really enjoy that experience. And then when suddenly she was introduced to the reality of less smooth paths, less nice smells than lavender, and less attractive noises than birds, it all started to realize that actually the perfectness of what we have the potential to offer, it needs managing better. She talked about wheelie bins. She talked about dog poo. She talked about banana skins. Do you remember? These are the realities. And I think maybe we don't need a banana skin officer in every authority. I think we need to go beyond that. But I think what she, and Anwella, I think, described it very well, is I think she awakened in us the fact that there were people who were starving for freedom. You know, that was the expression that I think Anwella used. And I think what we've tried to explore over the last few days is that we can measure perceptions and behaviours and environments, and I think we've got some pretty developed systems now for making sure we understand all of those things, and we are starting to merge these things and really understand how to do it. But Esther also talked about measuring birth weight, you know, the impact of environments on birth weights, on gun crime, and salarial cortisol, you know, stress. And I think, Marie Todd from Scotland said to us, this is about fairness. I think, Lake, you described it as social justice, making sure that we deal with social violence. Dorian and Mary from the Travellers community in a workshop that I was in just asked for respect. And Charles said, don't teach fear. He won't even mention the word fear to his children. All of it comes into a common theme that I thought was really nicely wrapped up by Edith and her mother. Edith said, can you just show that you care? Just show that you care. And Nessa said, make sure you're in the room to nag. I thought actually, you know, we can do both of those things, can't we? Show we care and be in the room to nag. And the third thing really, and the final thing I wanted to pick up was we were hoping to have a bit of impact. Not just around policy and budgets and people, but actually you put some metrics down early on. I think it was Una who shared with us that the lack of people moving is causing 4,000 people a year here in Ireland to die, and it's costing 1.5 billion for that. 1.5 billion, and then I thought we were celebrating 365 million being spent, the biggest budget ever being spent on walking and cycling in the world anywhere, as far as I know, being spent annually here in Ireland. And then you think, actually, there's 1.5 billion here that maybe we're not actually asking for enough yet of the government. But getting the money out the door still seems to be an issue. And because I'm going to run away from here quite quickly tomorrow, I thought I need to put this challenge down to you. You know, we've heard from Scotland where they've given it to an agency, you know, in order to get it done. Rona, I know you're here and your team, and you've explained to us how it's much more achievable to work with communities locally when you're outside of the government. We heard that, I think, also from Living Streets in the UK. We know that that's happened in other places. Jason, you work actually through the mountaineering group, don't you, to actually help with the delivery. This is like the trickle down or the rolling out, and actually embracing advocacy to be potentially the deliverers of change, not just the people who are going to come in and bang on your table. And I think that's redefining conversations. And so my challenge to Eamon would be to think carefully about whether actually active travel might be better delivered as well as delivered by people outside of government, people like the Irish Pedestrians Network, you know, that is maybe just a few people, few really good-willed, really clever, interested, inspired people who might actually be able to, with your support, grow to actually deliver walking and make sure that that money is being spent on walking around across the whole of Ireland. I think it's not a bad idea. And I certainly hope that Robert, in our work with the PEP, you know, this is 56 countries who we could take with us on this journey with Ireland. And in Africa, as Carly, I know would want us to say that there's another 54 countries in Africa who are saying that they want more national policy for walking. You know, I think within the next year, we could have literally over 100 countries that we could take with us with this island journey, translating the sorts of things we've learnt here, the sort of experience that you've shared, and actually really deliver national developments in terms of commitments and actions in a coordinated way that would definitely transform. But I don't want to leave anyone behind. We've had chats already today about Latin America, Asia Pacific. You know, I do think there is an opportunity to globalize this quickly. But let's make sure that, as Kieran warned us, that, you know, they had policy like this, saying the sorts of things that we've been talking about here 32 years ago at the European Commission. And we're still asking for the same things. So policy isn't enough. We need to think beyond that. And I think, as Eamon Ryan did remind us, he's here with a transport and a climate agenda. When we were in Rotterdam recently, you know, the minister was in charge of, I think, women, economy, and transport. You know, I like how these things are blending, and how people are taking on joint responsibilities and seeing that it isn't as structured as it used to be in column thinking. And what we heard from Skye just now, you know, maybe we shouldn't be having even transport departments, climate departments, you know, public health departments. But what about love and joy departments? I actually quite like that idea. Wouldn't it be lovely to be the director of love and joy? You know, I just think that would be fantastic. I think it was Eamon who quoted David White, and I know, you know, you are poetic people. I think your president is a poet. I think this is something that we need to embrace, but I like the fact that he said it's your steps that make the path. And I do hope that we can, in some small way, with this conference, that they will have helped you, whether they're small steps or big strides, that they'll all be in the right direction and they'll all be forwards. As Robert said, I think quite early on, we need to build forwards better. Not build back better, build forwards better, I think you said. I think that's quite right, but let's build forwards better together. Thank you very much for coming and for being part of this event. You might think, why is he wearing that shirt? This is that moment. Professor, can I invite you up? David, please. This is the end of this moment here in Ireland, but we always look forward. And believe it or not, 22 years, we aren't stopping yet. In fact, as you've heard, we're just starting with Walk21 Europe. We've got projects ongoing, and we're very keen, and as quite right we should, that if we are going as an international organisation, 22 years, but we've actually never yet been on the African continent. And what's happened in the last couple of years during COVID particularly is that we found a real awakening in experts, in politicians, in campaigners across the whole of Africa, where people have said, actually, because of COVID, they've recognised that we actually had as much as 95% of people said, we realise now we're not doing enough for walking and also for cycling, actually, across Africa. 95% said they want to do more, but they're going to need support and help. We started a network with UN Environment, and I'm sorry that Carly, who represents the Share the Road project, couldn't actually be with us today, but she has a very good excuse. Skye, you'll be sympathetic to this, that she's actually expecting twins. Yes, it is worth clapping. And look, we said to her, look, what do you think? Is this the right time? Could we come to Africa? Could we do something in Africa and actually harness that enthusiasm, that energy, that excitement to actually where we've probably got the most numbers of people walking in the world, and yet it's the least safe place, the least amount of policy, and the least amount of infrastructure? Is now the time that Walk21 could come and really help change the game? And she said, yes, please. So, Bron invited me. Well, Bron went to Kigali in Rwanda. She met the mayor, Prudence Rubinginsa, I should say. And he said, yes, come to Rwanda. I didn't go, but I got the shirt. And because Carly is about to have these twins, maybe now, I don't know, but Carly, if you're watching, I'm sorry you're not with us, and I know that many of our African colleagues would want to have been here as well. We did have some visa issues. I know there's people from Gambia, Sierra Leone, Malawi, who were down to come, who were really hoping to come. There were people literally camping at the airports, hoping for a visa that could be part of this event, and I'm sorry that you haven't been able to, all of you, come and demonstrate just how much enthusiasm there is on the continent. But we are going to Kigali. We're going to Kigali, Rwanda. It seems very strange for me to represent Kigali, Rwanda, but I do have the shirt at least.
Thank you very much. It has been an honour and a pleasure for TU Dublin to be able to host Ireland 21 as a national event, and I've learned a huge amount. I think everybody here has really learned a huge amount, and you can tell by the weather today that we're all really sad that it's ended and that you're having to leave. It is a tradition to present a gift to the next host company, and it's fantastic that Kigali and Rwanda will come in as the host city. We were thinking about what gift we could present that would reflect on Dublin and Ireland and have some meaning and link to walking as well. And it so happens that this year is the 100th anniversary of the first publication of James Joyce's Ulysses. And for those who don't know Ulysses, it captures a day, the 16th of June, when the main character, Leopold Bloom, walks around Dublin, and it describes the characters and the places that he sees and visits and the things that happen to him during that day. And it's not an easy read. I have to admit, I have not actually read it in full. It's hard work, but it is considered to be a masterpiece of a sort of a modern interpretation of Homer's Odyssey. And to that end, I'd like to present you with a centenary publication of James Joyce's Ulysses, reflecting walking in Dublin.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. There's my hand luggage, I guess. Thank you. No, genuinely, I think that's a wonderful gift, an incredibly well thought gift, and it's something I will definitely take and hand over to the city. As I say, they couldn't come, but to just give you a flavour, if I may. Oh, I wanted to show them the thing. But yes, you're absolutely right. I could get really excited. I'm so excited about going to Kigali. But you're absolutely right. This is why we're a good team, you see. We always describe it. You know, Adrian, you said that you have your doctor, your left leg, your right leg. Bron is always the right leg. I just put my left foot in it, I think. What we would love to do is not forget to tie up the fact that there's a lot of people to thank. I picked out Jason and I picked out Lorraine here, but actually there's a whole team behind this. And we would like to invite you all, please, those who've been part of this, so fundamentally part of this, who've changed your lives in order to make sure that this event happened. Would you please come on the stage so that we can give you a big round of applause and thank you properly.
And this includes Anne and Nadine, wherever you are. Yeah.
David O'Connor, are you here?
And the Catapult team who have made all the tech work and all of this conference hang together for us as well. So.
I didn't want to put off Kigali, knowing that how many people you're going to have to include in order to make this sort of event this magical. Watch this video. But thank you so much, team, and I hope that you'll come to Kigali and help us there as well. Please.
Hello, Walk21 Ireland. Carly here from the United Nations Environment Programme. The UNEP Share the Road programme has been working tirelessly to build momentum globally, but particularly in Africa, for better policies and infrastructure for people who walk. Really, this is a fundamental and basic human right, and it's smart for people and planet. We are seeing the momentum and political will building in Africa. This is helped by the Africa Network for Walking and Cycling, hosted by UNEP and chaired by the Walk21 Foundation, as well as our PAPAM project, developing a Pan-African action plan for active mobility, which we want to see every African government sign up to by the end of 2023. We kicked off this process at our recent Africa Forum in Kigali in June this year. This is all the more reason why I am so excited that next year the Walk21 conference will be hosted for the first time on the Africa continent in Kigali, really showing that Africa is ready to put its best foot forward and prioritise the needs of pedestrians. I'm personally excited to work with the fabulous Walk21 team and the Kigali and Rwanda government, along with others, to make this event the most exciting and epic Walk21 conference yet. Thank you.
See you next year.